right, now that we have talked generally about the learning hooks for this month, let's look at some specific math examples. The first one we're going to look at is the word recognition chart. The word recognition chart can be used to activate prior knowledge at the beginning of a unit as a preview and/or review of keywords. First, I will choose 9, 12, whatever size box you want to use, one vocabulary word for each box and one example for each of those words. When using it to activate the prior knowledge, first you as a teacher will say the word and point to that corresponding word in the box. Second, you'll have the students repeat the word. Then give a brief description of the word. Math is a foreign language to many of our students, so we need to treat it as such. This is why it is so important to have the students repeat the word and have a visual example of the word next to it. So let's look at a specific math example. So let's say I'm preparing for my first unit, and my first unit is called Relationships Between Quantities and Reasoning with Equations. The first thing I do is I look at my standards and identify the key words, those key vocabulary words for a student to be able to be successful in this unit, whether it's prior knowledge or new vocabulary. So I've looked at my standards for this unit and I've chosen these 9 words. And I've made my chart, came up with my examples. So what I would do first is I would point to the word expression and I would say expression. And then I would have my students repeat expression. And then I would point to the example and say an expression is a mathematical phrase. An expression does not have an equal sign. Then I would move on to equation. I would say the word equation. Students would repeat equation. And then I would give my brief description. It's a mathematical sentence. An equation has an equal sign, and so on. I do that for each of the words in my table. Should take 2 to 4 minutes at the most. This chart can also be used to solidify academic vocabulary. Have this chart viewable throughout the lessons, throughout the unit, and anytime you use one of the words in an explanation or a student uses one of the words in an explanation, point to that word. So this way, students who are mostly visual learners are seeing the word and the example together, and they begin to associate the two to build that academic vocabulary. This is very important for our ELL students. And again, math is a foreign language to most of our students. So most of our students in a math class are language learners. With the adoption of Common Core state standards, the strong academic vocabulary is essential for their learning. This is especially evident when we look at our mathematical practices. In practice 1, students have to be able to make sense of problems. No longer is it okay for the teacher to read the problem and then tell the students what they need to do. Students will now have to read the problem, figure out the vocabulary, what words they know, what words they don't know, figure out what the question is asking them to do, and then be able to solve the problem. So in order to do this, they have to have a strong academic vocabulary. Practice 3, construct viable arguments and critique reasoning of others. Students cannot do this if they don't have the strong academic vocabulary. They have to be able to use proof to back up their explanation or their reasoning. Practice 4, use appropriate tools strategically. In this unit specifically that I talked about earlier, students will have to be able to know when to use an expression, when to use an equation, when to use an inequality. Those are the tools of this unit. If they don't know when to use which, they're not able to use appropriate tools. Also, they need to attend to precision. So when they are attending to precision, a big piece of this is using appropriate vocabulary. It is important that we are teaching mathematical vocabulary explicitly. We need to move away from giving students a long list of words and copying the words from the definitions from the glossary to using these words in context and having the students build the vocabulary as we move through the unit and continually following up throughout the unit and not just at the end. Moving on to our next learning hook, informal webbing.